The room had the stillness of a courtroom just before a verdict, silent, coiled, ready to snap. Bright ceiling lights flooded every polished surface of the Oversight Subcommittee hearing chamber. Cameras blinked red across the perimeter like watching eyes. The gavel had barely landed when the moment unfolded, too fast for preparation, too slow to be ignored. Jesse Waters sat in the gallery, slick-haired and smug, wearing his smile like a badge of immunity. Invited as a media ethics witness, he adjusted his jacket as if anchoring the 8 p.m. slot on Fox, not testifying before Congress. His fingers tapped the table with performative ease. He didn't respect the room. He didn't need to. He knew the room was watching him. He leaned toward his mic with the casual venom of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. "Some of us came prepared," he said, glancing at his notes. "Others just came to be seen." A few Republican aides chuckled. The line wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. Across the room, Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. Her stillness was louder than any gasp. She paused, not out of hesitation but precision, like a scalpel poised mid-air. Then she looked up, eyes sharp as glass. Her voice cut through the heat. "Mr. Waters," she said, calm as thunder, "I was elected to serve. You were hired to perform. Let's not confuse the two." A breath caught somewhere, then another. The room inhaled but didn't exhale. Someone near the back whispered, "She didn't just say that." What followed wouldn't be a debate. It wouldn't be another televised sideshow for Twitter. This was something else. What started as a smirking insult was about to ignite a firestorm, one that would drag the media machine into the light, question the morality of mockery, and force America to watch a black woman do what she's always done. Show up, speak out, and dismantle a lie, one razor-sharp truth at a time. Outside the chamber, reporters framed the hearing as routine. Another oversight session, another PR parade. But inside, the air told a different story, thick with expectation, pulsing with the quiet hum of coming confrontation. The hearing was titled Media Influence and Public Accountability. Officially, it was about exploring how commentary journalism shapes political perception. Unofficially, it was about who gets to define truth and who gets to profit from distortion. Jesse Waters had been called not for what he reported, but how. His viral monologues, sarcastic clips, and nightly segments had turned public officials into punchlines, most often women of color, and Jasmine Crockett in particular. His presence today wasn't a coincidence. It was the system finally staring at its own reflection. He sat confidently, even cockily, arms resting wide, chin tilted up. When the chair formally introduced him as a television personality and political commentator, he smiled like it was a compliment. Jasmine Crockett didn't look at him. Not yet. She flipped through her printed notes, pen in hand, posture straight, expression unreadable. She knew this wasn't a fight he expected. That was his weakness. He thinks it's entertainment, she thought. But for me, it's blood work. Committee Chairwoman Lynn Altman banged the gavel. The Subcommittee on Media Influence is now in session. Opening statements began. Republicans framed Waters as a necessary disruptor, someone who asks the questions the mainstream media is afraid to. Democrats pushed back, calling out the way infotainment blurred the line between facts and ridicule. Waters soaked it all in. When introduced for his testimony, he leaned toward the mic. "I just want to thank the committee," he began, "for recognizing how influential I am." There were eye rolls. One Republican aide chuckled, but Jasmine didn't move. She was saving her breath and her fire for later. She reviewed the stats again. Over 38 million views on Waters' segments about her. Her name turned into memes, her speeches chopped into GIFs. One clip dubbed her Congress's clown. Another mocked her law degree, questioning if she even passed the bar. She had passed the bar, in 2 states. And today, she would prove something else, on public record, under oath, and with the nation watching. Waters didn't know it yet, but he'd walked into a courtroom dressed for a comedy club, and Jasmine Crockett wasn't here to perform. She was here to prosecute. The questioning began with formalities, legal frameworks, precedent, and the role of the press in a functioning democracy. Waters played his part effortlessly, dipping between sarcasm and civics like a man doing stand-up in a courtroom. I'm not a journalist, he said, grinning. I'm a truth teller, and sometimes the truth hurts feelings. A few Republican aides smirked behind their legal pads. Waters winked at the cameras as if to say, watch this go viral later. Representative Bowman took the floor, calm, direct. Mr. Waters, when you highlight public officials, are you concerned with accuracy or entertainment? Waters shrugged. If it's accurate and entertaining, that's the sweet spot. Bowman pressed. But when you selectively edit clips of members like Jasmine Crockett, cutting out their full argument, stripping context, is that journalism? Waters smiled. That's television. The tension thickened. Bowman sighed and yielded. The chair glanced toward Crockett, who hadn't spoken since her initial cut through the silence. Not yet. But it was coming. Then, unprovoked, Waters leaned back into his mic and said it. I mean, let's be honest, some folks up here just love being on camera more than doing the work. His gaze flicked toward Jasmine. No offense, Congresswoman Crockett. It was too casual to be accidental, too rehearsed to be innocent. The jab had all the hallmarks of his show, smirking, slippery, and saturated with implications. The room inhaled. Jasmine didn't react right away. Her face remained composed, eyes locked on him like a slow-turning dial. Someone in the gallery whispered, "Did he just?" He did. He absolutely did. The insult landed in layers, first as an attack on her seriousness, then as a stereotype, then as a public test. Would she react the way he wanted her to? Waters leaned back, satisfied. He thought he'd won something. Jasmine reached for her mic. "I'd like to respond," she said, her voice calm and even. The chair nodded. "Proceed." She looked at Waters, not blinking. "Mr. Waters, I don't recall addressing you prior to this moment, so I'm curious, what compelled you to address me?" He laughed lightly, but it cracked around the edges. She continued, sharper now. "If your commentary is that fragile, that the presence of a black woman doing her job unsettles your spotlight, you should say that, plainly." A ripple of shocked murmurs moved through the room. A staffer's pen clattered to the floor. This wasn't a soundbite. This was the spark, and it had just been lit on federal record. The pause after Jasmine's words was long enough to hum. It wasn't just the force of what she said, it was the way she said it. Not loud, not defensive, just surgical. Waters tried to laugh it off. "Wow, okay," he said, still smiling, though tighter now. "Someone sensitive." Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't blink. "Mr. Waters, don't confuse clarity with sensitivity," she said. "You came here with jokes. I came here with receipts." The chair gave her the floor, and she took it. Not like a performer, but like someone reading the charges aloud. "I've seen the reels, the headlines, the slow-motion edits with laugh tracks underneath my voice. You took my floor speech, and turned them into punchlines for your audience. But here's what you didn't air, my legislative record." She held up a folder, thick with paper. "This is a list of every bill I've co-sponsored in the last year. Education reform, housing protections, veterans benefits. You don't air this because it doesn't fit the character you've created." Waters interjected with mock innocence. "Oh, come on, Congresswoman. We're just having fun. You know that, right?" She turned to him slowly. "Let me ask you this," she said. "When you called me a racial mascot on your show last month, was that fun for you?" The room froze. Waters shifted in his seat. "I was quoting. You were amplifying," she cut in. "Don't play semantics. You gave that language oxygen, and now I get death threats disguised as fan mail." No more laughter now. "You've built a career not on journalism," she continued, "but on caricature. Not on facts, but fragments. You present the outrage, strip the context, and send it into millions of homes where people begin to believe that shouting down a black woman is not just entertainment, it's patriotism." A low murmur rolled through the hearing chamber. Some nodded, others shifted uncomfortably. Jasmine pressed on. "You frame me as angry when I push back, as unqualified despite my degrees, as attention-seeking when I dare to speak with conviction. You turn presence into provocation, and then you hide behind the word satire when we call it out." Waters tried again, tone softening. If you feel misrepresented, I'm sorry. She leaned forward. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to the girls watching your show with their fathers, wondering if they'll ever be taken seriously when they speak with fire. Apologize to the women who've had to shrink themselves so they wouldn't be called too loud, too bold, too black. The room was no longer a hearing. It was a courtroom, and Jasmine was no longer the witness. She was the cross-examiner. I wasn't elected to entertain you, Mr. Waters, she said finally. I was elected to protect the truth, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it is. She reached down, picked up her pen and sat back. Silence. Not stunned, not frozen. Reverent. Outside the chamber, the clip was already climbing. Twitter, TikTok, headlines were being drafted in real time. But inside, something rarer was happening. They were listening. The quiet that followed Jasmine's rebuke wasn't emptiness. It was recognition, like a courtroom after a verdict, before the reality sets in. But not everyone was moved. Representative Byron Michaels, a conservative from Georgia and a regular Fox News guest, shifted in his leather seat, clearly irritated. Chairman, are we really going to allow a political monologue here? I thought this was about media ethics, not personal grievances. The chairman raised an eyebrow, but before he could respond, Jasmine did. I welcome that challenge, she said, adjusting the microphone. Let's talk about ethics then. Let's talk about why certain people feel they have the right to define what leadership looks like. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. When I raise my voice, I'm called angry. When I ask questions, I'm accused of grandstanding. When I bring data, I'm accused of spinning narratives. But when my white counterparts speak with passion, they're called bold. When they interrupt, they're tough. When they challenge you, they're speaking truth to power. So tell me, Congressman, who wrote that rule book? Byron leaned back with a forced smirk. No one's attacking your identity, Congresswoman. Jasmine turned toward him fully, gaze sharp. You're not saying it out loud, that's the point. She reached into her folder again, this time pulling out a printed headline from just 2 weeks earlier. The font was bold. The source, the Daily Sentinel, a hard-right online paper. Jasmine Crockett, loud, flashy, and dangerous. She held it up for the record. This is the language used to describe a sitting member of Congress doing her job. This is the coded attack, branding me not as a legislator but as a spectacle. And you expect me to sit here and pretend it's not racial? The room was still. Byron had nothing. Even Waters was quiet now. Jasmine went on, slower now, more personal. I didn't run for Congress because I wanted to be on TV. I ran because I saw mothers crying over eviction notices, kids afraid to walk to school, veterans standing in food lines. And when I got here, I realized I had to fight twice as hard just to be taken seriously. Not because of what I said, but because of what I looked like saying it. She looked around the room, at the cameras, the aides, the people in suits who never had to wonder if their voice would be dismissed as attitude. I represent more than a district. I represent every woman who's been told to wait her turn, every black professional who's had to smile through slights just to keep their job, every student who was told they were articulate like it was a surprise. Her voice broke slightly, but she didn't stop. I didn't come here to perform, I came here to testify. And this hearing? This isn't just about media bias. It's about the national script we've all been handed, the one where black ambition is treated as arrogance, where black intelligence is seen as a threat, and where black leadership is constantly on trial. The chairman cleared his throat, visibly moved. Let the record show the Congresswoman's remarks are entered in full. Byron Michaels, visibly unsettled, crossed his arms but said nothing. Waters leaned back in his seat, no longer smirking, just watching. And across the room, a young black staffer, a woman barely in her 20s, stood a little straighter. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The moment said it all. Outside the car, Amber, the clip had already gone viral. The headline on MSNBC read, Crockett shreds double standard, black leadership is always on trial. And on social media, a new hashtag began trending. Let Jasmine speak. Inside the chamber, though, the real shift wasn't digital. It was spiritual, a recalibration of posture, of presence, as if everyone had finally realized they weren't just watching a hearing, they were witnessing a reckoning. One that was long overdue. Jesse Waters leaned forward, clearing his throat with performative restraint. The smirk had returned, not as a mark of confidence, but as armor. "If I may," he said, voice syrupy, "I came here under subpoena to speak about journalistic standards, not to be the subject of a political cross-examination." He let that last phrase linger, eyes darting to the camera. A practiced pause, always aware of the red light blinking in his favor. Jasmine didn't flinch. "Oh, I assure you, Mr. Waters, this is about journalistic standards, but when a network makes a habit of degrading elected officials while claiming to report news, it stops being journalism. It becomes propaganda." A soft murmur rolled through the hearing room. Jesse leaned back. "I don't write the scripts, Congresswoman." "But you read them," she said sharply. "You read them with confidence, with pride, with certainty. And when those scripts reduce black women to stereotypes, when they imply we're only in Congress because of diversity quotas, or that we dress like Instagram influencers, you never push back, you lean in." She lifted a manila folder and slid a document forward. "Let's talk about the segment your network aired last month, Democrats' Fashion Circus. You listed my name between images of reality TV stars, mocked my hair, my earrings, my dress, then said we were more love hip-hop than lawmaking." Waters adjusted his tie. "It was satire." "Sarcasm? That reinforces stereotypes is not satire, it's coded violence." Gasps. Even a few heads turned toward the press gallery. Waters tried again, changing tone. "Look, I have tremendous respect for your office, but if every criticism gets framed as racism or sexism, then we lose the ability to have honest conversations." Jasmine's voice dropped to a low, surgical calm. "You know what's dishonest. Acting like context doesn't exist. Acting like power dynamics don't exist. You have a platform that reaches millions. I have a vote. One. And yet, you speak with more authority on policy than I'm ever allowed to without being told to stay in my lane. So when you talk about honest conversation, what you really mean is comfortable conversation." The tension in the room tightened, like a taut wire ready to snap. Waters raised his hand slightly, a defense masquerading as a gesture. "You can't blame an entire network for one segment." "Oh, I'm not," Jasmine replied. "I'm holding the entire network accountable for years of manufacturing outrage at the expense of truth. I'm holding your producers accountable for booking panels where no one looks like me, then claiming you're showing both sides. I'm holding your editors accountable for selectively cutting clips to make sure my anger is visible, but not my facts." She held up another printed article, this one titled, "Crockett's Meltdown, Democrat Goes Off the Rails During Budget Debate." "This was after I spent 14 minutes walking through fiscal policy line by line," she said. "But the only 9 seconds your team aired was me raising my voice after being interrupted 5 times. She looked directly at Waters. "You don't show what happens to us. You only show what you can use from us." He looked away, just briefly. It was small, but in a room like this, that blink matters. The chairman leaned into his mic. "Let the Congresswoman's materials be entered into the record." Jasmine didn't sit back down. She wasn't done. "You want to talk about media ethics?" she scared the whole room now. "Fine. Let's talk about how networks profit off racial caricatures. Let's talk about how pundits who've never stepped foot in a housing court get to frame crime debates. Let's talk about how the word woke has become a dog whistle so loud even the dogs are tired." A few chuckles, nervous, but real. "Let's talk about why a black woman speaking with clarity is treated as a threat, not just by your network, but by the viewers you train." That hit. Hard. Waters shifted again, but there was nowhere left to pivot. Jasmine finally sat down, her silence now louder than his opening insult. Outside the chamber, the clips began circulating again. On TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. One headline read, "Crockett eviscerates Fox News. You don't show what happens to us, just what you can use." And beneath it, a single comment had gone viral. She didn't just clap back. She cross-examined an entire empire. Inside the chamber, Waters remained frozen, his own script shredded in real time. A long pause hovered in the hearing chamber. No one breathed. Jesse Waters sat rigid, fingers laced, jaw flexing just enough to show he still believed this was salvageable. But something in the air had changed. The ground beneath him, once familiar, had shifted. Chairman David Langford, a seasoned Republican from Ohio, finally cleared his throat. "Let the record reflect," he said, tapping the mic once, "that the witness has been heard, and that Congresswoman Crockett's materials will be accepted without objection." His voice was clipped, formal, but his eyes darted uneasily toward his colleagues. Then, unexpectedly, Representative Ana Delgado, an independent from Arizona, raised her hand. "I'd like to speak," she said, not waiting for permission before leaning forward. "This committee asked Mr. Waters here under the pretense of evaluating media ethics. What we just witnessed wasn't a partisan exchange. It was a moment of truth." She turned her gaze toward Jasmine. "You were not angry. You were accurate. You did what this body is supposed to do, hold power to account even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient." The cameras pivoted. Suddenly the storyline had deviated. Not Democrat versus Republican, not pundit versus politician, but something deeper. A crack in the usual script. Representative Malik Bennett, a quiet moderate from Michigan who rarely took bold stances, shifted forward next. "I've disagreed with Congresswoman Crockett on a dozen bills," he said calmly, "but I've never disagreed with her right to be heard. And frankly, I've been in this chamber when men shouted, cursed, threw tantrums, and were never called emotional or unhinged." He didn't look at Waters. He didn't have to. The chairman tried to regain footing. "Let's bring this back to the scope of the hearing." But the scope had already burst at the seams. Representative Sarah Kim, a freshman Republican from Nevada, surprised everyone when she spoke next. "I come from a conservative district," she said plainly, "but I also come from a newsroom family. My mother was a Korean-American reporter who had to fight for every second of airtime, and I know what it feels like to be reduced to a stereotype because your tone doesn't match their expectations." A rustle of disbelief moved through the Republican seats. She exhaled. "I don't agree with everything Rep. Crockett said today, but I recognize courage when I see it, and I recognize when a system tries to silence it." Jasmine didn't move. Her expression was unreadable, but her fingers, resting on the desk, were steady, calm in the middle of a storm she didn't create, but now fully commanded. Waters turned, attempting once more to speak. "With all due respect," but the chairman raised a hand. "You've had your time, Mr. Waters. You'll have your closing remarks, as will the Congresswoman, but right now the committee needs to deliberate." It was the political version of being muted. And then, in a moment that felt almost cinematic, Representative Crockett stood. Not to grandstand, not to perform, just to speak. "I didn't come here to be clapped for," she said, eyes moving across the room. "I came here because I'm tired of watching people like Mr. Waters walk into rooms like this with the assumption that their version of the truth is the only one that counts." She paused. "Truth isn't a headline, it isn't a segment. It's what survives the silence after the cameras stop rolling. That's what I care about. That's what we should all care about." And with that, she sat back down. No applause, no cheers, just a powerful quiet, the kind that follows something irreversible. Later that evening, clips of the hearing flooded every social feed. But what trended wasn't Jesse Waters, or even Jasmine Crockett's most viral quote. It was a hashtag no one saw coming. Stand with truth. Across party lines, political allegiances, and media empires, something had cracked open. Not everyone agreed with her, but no one could ignore her. Not anymore. The next morning, the media storm hit full throttle. Cable networks looped the hearing highlights like they were playoff replays. Waters' smirk, Jasmine's cold precision, Delgado's surprising alliance. Every pause, every glance, every clipped phrase dissected by panels of analysts who hadn't been in the room, but suddenly spoke like they owned it. Then, at 10:17 a.m., Fox News released a carefully curated statement. Jesse Waters was invited by the House subcommittee as a media voice and conducted himself respectfully under hostile questioning. Fox News stands by Jesse's right to challenge narratives that often go unquestioned in politically charged hearings. It was typical, tight, evasive, designed to end the conversation without actually addressing the substance. On social media, right-wing influencers applauded the dignity with which Waters endured a partisan ambush. Hashtags like #JesseWasRight began to trend in conservative circles. The echo chamber did what it always does: deflect, distort, reframe. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't done. That afternoon, standing outside the Capitol beneath a sweltering D.C. sun, she faced a cluster of reporters. No podium, no entourage, just her and a blistering glare that dared anyone to ask the wrong question. "I've seen the statement," she said plainly. "Fox News believes Jesse Waters conducted himself respectfully?" Let me be clear. Respect is not defined by how calmly you insult someone. It's defined by whether or not you see them as fully human before you speak. Cameras clicked. Pens froze mid-air. She wasn't reading from a script. This was live fire. He came into that chamber not to testify but to perform, to provoke, to undermine, to reassert an old and tired belief that women like me don't belong in rooms where decisions are made. And let's not dance around it, black women especially. A reporter from Politico raised his hand. "Congresswoman, what do you say to those calling this entire moment just another partisan stunt?" Jasmine didn't flinch. "I say if defending my right to be treated with basic decency is a stunt, then this entire country was built on acrobatics." Laughter broke out, not mockery, but the kind born from disbelief that someone had finally said it. Then she lowered her tone almost to a whisper, but the mic caught every syllable. "Fox News wants to spin this into a question of bias? Fine, here's my bias. I'm biased toward truth, toward equity, toward making sure little girls watching that hearing yesterday understand they don't have to shrink to be respected." Another reporter asked if she would file an ethics complaint. Her answer was fast. "I don't need to weaponize procedure, I weaponize facts." That line alone was replayed on MSNBC, CNN, even by late-night hosts who rarely mention House hearings. Twitter exploded. TikTok was flooded with remix edits. Jasmine's calm defiance cut against Jesse's sideways glance, Delgado's defense, the collective silence afterward. A meme even began circulating, a split screen of Waters' face frozen mid-smirk and Jasmine's expressionless stare, captioned, "One came to perform, one came to serve." Meanwhile, Fox's spin was losing altitude. Waters himself tried to reclaim the narrative on his primetime show that evening, smirking into the camera with, "I guess I touched a nerve." But something was different. His audience was still there, but the momentum wasn't. He looked like a man trying to outrun a spotlight that had turned from flattering to forensic. And while his clip garnered the usual cheers from predictable corners of the internet, it was Jasmine's words that kept echoing louder. That night on Instagram Live, she spoke again, not as a politician, but as a woman sitting on her living room couch, hair tied up, voice raw. "Don't let them gaslight you into thinking professionalism means silence," she said to over 300,000 viewers. "It means showing up. It means speaking up, especially when they want you quiet." The comments poured in, from teachers, from lawyers, from young black girls who saw themselves for the first time not in a protest chant, but in a congressional hearing, calm, unapologetic, unmoved. The next morning, a quiet storm built behind the headlines. And Jesse Waters? He had gone viral. But Jasmine Crockett? She had gone permanent. It started as a whisper, a single tweet, clipped video, bold caption. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar. "I stand with Crockett." Then another. This wasn't a clapback. This was a masterclass. Serve not perform. And then, the flood. By noon, "I stand with Crockett" had cracked 1 million uses. By nightfall, it was trending worldwide, not just in the US, but in the UK, South Africa, Brazil. Newsrooms couldn't keep up with the volume. Cable shows scrambled to adjust their rundowns. Political influencers, celebrities, authors, and everyday Americans posted their own responses. A teacher in Atlanta uploaded a classroom moment. Fourth graders watching Jasmine's hearing clip, fists on chins, eyes wide. "They've never been this quiet," she wrote. "They're listening to power in real time." A single mom in Detroit posted a video of her daughter standing in the mirror, practicing Jasmine's now iconic line, "Mr. Waters, I was elected to serve, you were hired to perform." And on TikTok, young black women stitched clips of the hearing with scenes from courtroom dramas, Beyoncé lyrics, Maya Angelou quotes, remixing the moment into cultural permanence. But this wasn't just internet noise. Organizations began releasing statements of support. The Congressional Black Caucus issued a press release defending Jasmine's conduct and calling for a broader conversation about media harassment of public officials. Then came the pushback. Right-wing outlets labeled the movement woke hysteria, a social media tantrum staged by identity-obsessed elites. Fox News doubled down. Waters devoted an entire segment to mocking the hashtags, playing a soundbite of Jasmine and adding a laugh track underneath. But it backfired. Because for every fake chuckle, there were 10,000 real ones, of people realizing what they'd just witnessed wasn't a meme, but a mirror. A mirror showing who had power, who abused it, and who was no longer willing to smile through it. The moment had slipped through the cracks of partisan punditry and landed where real things live, in emotion, memory, culture. By Friday, something astonishing happened. Thousands of black women across the country, from hill staffers to hairstylists, posted their own stories of being interrupted, disrespected, underestimated in rooms that pretended to be professional. Many ended their posts with, "We don't shout to be heard, we speak to be remembered. #Jasmine taught me." At a rally in Philadelphia, a grassroots organizer took the mic and said, "It's not about Crockett versus Waters anymore. It's about showing up in spaces that were never built for us, and owning the damn room anyway." The crowd roared. Even politicians across the aisle took notice. A moderate senator, usually quiet on racial issues, tweeted cautiously, "We may not always agree with Representative Crockett's tone, but she deserves respect and space to do her job without mockery." It wasn't an endorsement, but it was movement, and the movement kept growing. A New York muralist painted a striking image on the side of a Brooklyn building. Jasmine seated upright, gavel in hand, with flames of truth curling around her shoulders. At the bottom, in clean white block letters, "She didn't come to perform." Reporters rushed to ask her how it felt to become a symbol. But Jasmine refused to play icon. In a sit-down with MSNBC, she said, "This can't just be about me. I'm not trying to trend, I'm trying to govern, but if this moment reminds someone out there they don't have to accept being reduced, that matters more than any headline." The anchor nodded. But even she looked momentarily overwhelmed by how Jasmine had turned a media attack into a national moment of reckoning, not through outrage, but through unwavering calm. Behind the scenes, something else began shifting. Democratic strategists realized they had stumbled upon not just a rising star, but a symbol of something deeper. Focus groups showed Jasmine's approval ratings climbing fast among independents and younger votes. Her media team, originally just 2 staffers with overworked phones, suddenly fielded requests from international press, Netflix producers, and book agents. But Jasmine didn't capitalize. She clarified, "Let me be clear. I'm not chasing celebrity. I'm chasing clarity. If this movement grows, it has to grow beyond me." That night, in a moment now etched into internet history, someone projected 6 words onto the Capitol dome using a hidden laser setup. No one claimed credit. No one needed to. The words glowed through the night. "She served. He performed. We saw." The next Monday, Jesse Waters returned to his primetime chair. But something was off. The usual smirk that introduced his monologues, the self-satisfied grin he'd worn like armor, had thinned. His voice still carried the same cadence, the same attempt at mockery. But the audience could feel it. The swagger was dented. He opened with what was supposed to be a punchline. "Apparently, I've sparked a revolution," led by a freshman congresswoman who thinks C-SPAN is a Broadway audition. The studio chuckled on cue, but the laugh didn't land like it used to. Because outside that studio, Something had shifted. Something Jesse hadn't anticipated. His clip, the moment he called Jasmine emotional with that smarmy tone, had been rewatched over 30 million times across platforms. But not because people agreed with him. They watched to see the unraveling. Because in that moment, Waters didn't look powerful. He looked exposed. A man so sure of his platform that he'd forgotten the world was watching, not just those who agreed with him. And Jasmine? She didn't just clap back. She stood back, let him talk himself into a hole, and then leveled the room with precision, not fury. Back in D.C., inside closed-door Republican strategy meetings, Waters' name came up, but not in praise. Senators whispered about the backlash, about how Crockett had turned what should have been a one-day media slap into a multi-week narrative victory for Democrats. She's not just a firebrand, one consultant told Axios. She's a storyteller, and Waters gave her the perfect scene partner, a fool in full view. Back at Fox, producers urged Jesse to move on. Pivot topics. Let the moment die quietly. But Jesse couldn't help himself. The next night, he tried again. I hear Jasmine Crockett's getting a Netflix doc. Maybe I'll cameo. As the villain? Twitter erupted again. But this time, not in outrage. In mockery of him. You don't need a cameo, Jesse. You already auditioned, and America watched you lose the role. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett refused to take a victory lap. In her next press appearance, when asked if she felt vindicated, she replied simply, "It's not about me versus Waters. It's about a system that still thinks the smartest woman in the room is being dramatic, just because she speaks without apology." The silence in the room said it all. Political analysts took note. This wasn't a blip. This was a recalibration of the frame. For years, women, especially black women, in Congress had been told to modulate, soften, perform professionalism for a gaze that never returned the favor. But now, that mask was cracked. Crockett didn't just refuse to play the game, she exposed the game board, and the man who built it for TV ratings. Her words were clipped into commencement speeches, used in HR trainings, played at church gatherings, quoted by columnists. I was elected to serve. You were hired to perform. It became more than a line. It became a litmus test. Every time another pundit tried to dismiss a woman's voice in politics, that clip resurfaced, not as defense, but as declaration. Waters, for all his bravado, had been memorialized, not as a truth-teller, but as a cautionary tale, a man who mistook his platform for purpose, a host who forgot that the world was recording, even between the punchlines. And Jasmine, she didn't need to gloat, because, see, in the end, she hadn't just silenced a pundit, she'd awakened a generation. A week later, during a routine committee hearing, Jasmine was once again interrupted, this time by another congressman trying to reclaim his time. The room tensed, expecting a repeat of fireworks. But she smiled, calmly yielded, and then, when it was her turn again, spoke with the same calm conviction. Respect is not given when it's easy. It's earned when it's hardest to offer. That clip went viral too. But now, there was no backlash, no split screen, just one unified chorus. She's not emotional, she's effective. As the Capitol lights dimmed that night, somewhere in a quiet edit bay, a junior producer at Fox News paused a segment draft. He stared at the footage of Waters mid-interruption, Jasmine mid-response, and exhaled. We're not winning this one. The echo of that moment, Waters interrupting, Jasmine steadying herself, and then delivering her now iconic reply, didn't just fade like most viral clips. It grew. In classrooms, on podcasts, in quiet living rooms where young black girls watched someone who looked like them refuse to flinch. You were hired to perform. I was elected to serve. That one sentence, delivered without shouting, became a sword and shield for a generation. And the irony? Jesse Waters, who had built his brand on provocation, on turning outrage into primetime fodder, had given her the perfect stage. Not one built of cameras or studio lights, but of intention, of truth sharpened by restraint. He had expected a meltdown, a tantrum, something he could mock on the next night's monologue. Instead, she responded like a surgeon, not to win a moment, but to make a point that would outlive both of them. Crockett didn't gloat. No press tour, no merch drop, no call to cancel Waters. She did something more subversive. She kept working. The following week, she co-sponsored a bill focused on housing equity, then another on maternal health disparity. She posted about none of it. Let the legislation speak louder than any viral soundbite. Because Crockett understood something Waters never did. True power doesn't scream. It sustains. It shows up to vote when the cameras are gone. It reads the bills, stays for the roll call, mentors interns, fights for amendments no one ever tweets about. And that's the twist. While Waters was still tweeting barbs, Crockett was rewriting narratives. She wasn't just the congresswoman who clapped back. She became the symbol of what happens when dignity meets fire, when intellect doesn't cower behind performance, and when a woman refuses to be labeled too much simply because she refuses to be less. Months later, a university in Georgia hosted a panel titled "The New Face of Political Resistance." One of the speakers, a young student, was asked what moment had changed her perception of political leadership. She didn't hesitate. It wasn't the yelling. It was that she didn't yell. It was that Jasmine Crockett looked directly at a man who tried to reduce her, and instead of shrinking, she educated. And Jesse Waters? He moved on, made jokes, found new targets. But in quiet corners of political media, consultants started whispering about the Crockett effect, a term used to warn future talking heads. Be careful who you bait. She might be smarter than your entire writing staff. In the end, this wasn't a story about revenge. It was about reversal, a reversal of expectation, of hierarchy, of who gets the final word in the courtroom of public discourse. Waters, with all his reach, couldn't erase her tone, and Crockett, with all her fire, didn't need to raise her voice, because she didn't come to win a fight. She came to change the rules. The clip went up just 2 hours after the hearing. One camera angle, 2 sentences, no background music, no edits. Mr. Waters, I was elected to serve. You were hired to perform. Let's not confuse the two. By morning, it had 30 million views. By noon, it was on the evening news, not just in America, but in Britain, Ghana, France, and Braz.